What's going on, Grizz fans? You know what time of the year it is. It's training camp right around the corner for the Memphis Grizzlies, and it's the Ortho South. Grizzlies countdown to training camp. I'm Michael Wallace, joined by the man, the point guard, the legend, Elliot Perry. And for this camp storyline, I mean, there's no one better in the region to talk about the veteran voices that we're going to have added to this roster going into training camp. When you look at what the Grizzlies did, acquiring Marcus Smart and then signing Derrick Rose, you can't get any better when you talk about what those two guys can bring to a locker room. And Elliot, as a former player who spent a decade in the league in a lot of different roles, what are those voices going to add to the Grizzlies from day one of training camp?
Well, I think first of all, leadership. I mean, that's the obvious is going to add leadership, but I also think it's going to add another level of identity with this basketball team. I mean, you talk about both of those guys have played important roles in the league throughout. Marcus Smart, one of the smartest guys in terms of his IQ, how to play and understanding the game. Derrick Rose, another one of those guys who's going to bring a lot of leadership to the locker room, and so I think it's going to solidify this team's identity.
When you talk about what those guys can say, you don't want to come in and disrupt a lot. They both have coming into new situations and having to learn. But Marcus Smart been to the finals. He's a defensive player of the year just a couple seasons ago. Derrick Rose was an MVP 3 years into his career. He's been at the top when it comes to having brand and name and all of those kind of things as a superstar. When you walk in the door with that kind of resume, what do the rest of the players on the team look at and what do they see?
I think they look at the same thing. They know that all the things that you stated, they've been to the finals, they've been an MVP, defensive player of the year. And so their resume speaks for itself. There's no question about it. And so those guys are going to come in. They're not going to come in and try to take over the locker room. They realize this is a really young team. They've had some success before, but they also need to, again, just be solidified, increase the IQ of this basketball team. Again, I still think redefining their identity. This team 2 years ago, we saw this team start to take off last year. I think we had a little hiccup, but a lot of it was just kind of outside noise. And so if we can clear a lot of that outside noise up, I think those guys are bringing that sort of veteran leadership again to the locker room. And so when your locker room is good, you go out on the floor and you play well. So I don't think these guys will come in here and try to disrupt what the Grizzlies already have.
And the voice is one thing, but actually the production is going to be another thing. These guys aren't coming in just to be cheerleaders and speech makers. They're going to actually have an opportunity to play. Ja Morant is going to be out for those first 25 games. We know that there's going to be a need for point guard play. So Marcus Smart and Derrick Rose both can play that position. What are some of the challenges of coming into a new environment? You've had a couple different new environments in your career to play through.
Doubt about it.
What is the mindset as you come in and try to navigate, learn a new coaching staff, learn a new playing system?
I think just that. I mean, trying to learn a new system, learn where players like to have the basketball, learn what the coach wants out of you in terms of not just on the floor, but also your voice in the locker room and your voice on the floor. I think you look at a guy like Marcus Smart, I think he's just that natural leader. He's a guy that's been vocal with his basketball team, and that's been publicly and privately. And so he's not a guy that's afraid of the moment. I think you take a guy like Derrick Rose, he's a guy that goes out there and, just do it by example. Like he just goes out there and play. He probably won't say a lot, but you know that Derrick Rose is a guy that's played at a high level, and I think these guys just will respect him. And I think that's what we've been needing. We've been needing some of that kind of veteran leadership in the locker room, again, to take this team to the next level.
Elliot, I wanted to ask you about this too from your playing days. I mean, I know when you were with Phoenix, you were sort of the younger guy, fighting and scratching, trying to find a role on a team full of veteran voices. By the time you got to Milwaukee, you were a veteran voice, trying to help Big Dog and some of those guys in that Milwaukee Bucks team kind of take that next step up. What do you see as these Grizzlies? Because again, Desmond Bane isn't a young guy anymore. Obviously Ja Morant, Luke Kennard, these guys aren't young anymore. They're sort of mid-career or just starting to scratch the surface of their prime. What is the next step that they need to take, especially when you see those resumes come in the door?
Honestly, I think it's the next step for these guys is, again, increasing the IQ, understanding being a professional, everything that comes to your mind, you don't have to say publicly, and then understanding night in and night out, in order to go out there and get to the next level in this league, you have to go out there and be mentally engaged in every game. Again, you can't take games off. And I think, again, that's what Marcus Smart and D. Rose will bring to this basketball team. But you mentioned Luke Kennard. I think another guy who can take that next step. He came in, he gave us some bright spots last year, but I think he can take that next step. You mentioned Desmond Bane. I think he's ready to take that next step if he's healthy. And then for Ja Morant is to really become, again, that leader on the floor. And I think Marcus Smart helped him become that next level leader. And that's what we've always talked about, that leadership on the floor, on and off the floor, in the locker room and on the court.
And I would be remiss if I didn't bring this one up to you to bring it home here. You of all people know what it's like to play in this city, like be Memphis State and then come back and play for the Grizzlies. You know, obviously Derrick Rose gets a chance to do that as well too. What does Derrick's return to Memphis kind of mean to you, and what does that mean? What will he mean to the city just to see him back in this building?
It means a lot. First of all, just thinking about me, it means a lot. You talk about him, a program that was dying program at the University of Memphis. D. Rose, John Calipari, all those guys come in, Chris Douglas Roberts, all those guys come in and really elevate the program, go to the finals. Unfortunately, we lose the finals to Kansas, but I think it's redemption for him, you know, being able to come back to Memphis and being, you know, having not been just kind of integral part in the city since he's left Memphis. And you know, just I feel like it's redemption for him. I feel like the city will embrace him. I think everybody is happy for him, and then he's at another part in his life and in his playing career, you know. If you think about it, not just his life, much more mature. He's married, has kids, but then also if he's one of those guys that if he doesn't play every night, he's not going to, you know, you're not going to have that dissension in the locker room because he's not a young guy who wants to really play. And so I just think that, you know, this signing of Derrick Rose is just a blessing in disguise for this basketball team in this city.
And we saw a similar situation play out when Vince Carter came here as well too. I mean, these veterans know who they are, know where they are in their career,
and still can play.
And can still play.
You mentioned that.
Have that validation in the locker room and on the court. You know, we got plenty of storylines, and we're just getting ready to tip off training camp for the Grizzlies. So you got to keep it locked to Grind City Media for all of your Grizzlies coverage and more. It's the Ortho South Grizzlies Countdown to Training Camp.